Hello. I'm here to speak on social deviance, Chapter 4, Physical Violence. And I'm doing this video PowerPoint commenting on Theo, Social Deviance textbook, and your textbook that you're assigned to read. So I hope that you're all reading your book, and or you could be following along with this video if you want to use your book to check me out, make sure I'm staying on track, which I may not every time, but you just have to. The joke is, but it's still on the test. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, I love you guys, and I'm just gonna go. It's not fairly short. Should be fairly short lecture. I may add some video that if I can't play it for you while we're watching, I will post the video um, below this link. I'll link the videos that are included in the PowerPoint. So make sure that, and I'll give you some instructions. So I'd like you to write a reflection, and I'll give you some instructions as we go, as I think of them. Love you guys. Hope you're staying warm. I'm doing the video because of an ice storm. But I like doing PowerPoint videos because I can say anything I want and I'm not distracted by you looking at your phones. And you can look at your phones and not feel any guilt. I don't know that you feel any guilt anyway. But anyway, try to pay attention, okay? Please, because this is really fairly interesting. We get into an interesting chapter with where we're not just talking about theory, but we're applying theory to specific deviance issues. So here goes. I guess I could start on the first slide instead of that slide. Okay, here's the title slide. Let's see if I can make this work. Yes. We have myths around physical violence, obviously, and all the time. We live our lives out in a cultural soup, so to speak, and within that soup, we create belief systems that help us understand things, that help. We try to make sense of it with things that may correlate together. Don't mean they may look like they're cause and effect, but we don't know that until we actually investigate further. But for example, African Americans are more likely to kill whites, and that women kill their husbands due to infidelity. Here's terrorism now accounts for much violence, especially in Israel and London. Regarding assault and aggravated assault, is the use of unlawful. It's the unlawful use of physical force against another person. So that's the legal definition. Aggravated assault involves intent to kill or the use of a deadly weapon where the victim survives rather than dies. So you have to have the intention that you're trying to kill him. It isn't. It may be that you just got angry and slugged him and you didn't intend to kill him. But in aggravated assault, you'd be angry and you're so angry you want to kill them. You'd be trying. You have intention. So it falls on the courts to decide. Assaulters are less likely than murderers to use firearms, which actually, if you kind of makes sense, murderers who use firearms are going to probably kill people easier than someone who doesn't. But there are people that, you may want to assault somebody, but you're not necessarily wanting to kill them. Assault rises dramatically during the summer. And why would that be? Probably because of climate. Everything's about climate these days. But the heat of the summer, as well as children tend to be home, so there's more stress. They're not in school. There's a tendency to be together in the summer too. So in the winter, well, that's not always, I guess in the winter you'd be together, but we're together in groups in the summer because we're outside and we're in contact. Who's more likely to kill? 90% of murders in the U.S. are the lower classes. So we could make a correlation there that with why that is. We could investigate further. You know, my guess is that people in lower classes feel they have less to lose. They may have less. They may have less comforts to distract them. They have less cushions that people in higher classes have more money and can pay for experiences, can afford therapy, can all kinds of things come into play here. And so you can see how you could come up with many, many, many different ideas about it. 12% of the general population, blacks account for 45% of the murders. So there's another, you could create a myth about that blacks are more murderous. Let's put it that way. That's how they used to classify people as criminals. They still do. Some people are just criminals. They're just born criminals. And people still use those kinds of classifications. Most killings are intra-racial. What does that mean? Intra means black on black crime, white on white crime. They're not necessarily racial, which is the total opposite of what they're trying to sell you in the media. Southern region has the highest rate of murders or killings. Large cities are significantly higher murder rate than small cities and rural areas. And so you can imagine why that might be, because they're crammed in together so tight that, and there's other reasons too, because there's more activity. It's not just being closer, it's activity that brings you into contact with other people. More men than women kill, and men tend to kill other men. Women usually kill in defense of themselves in an abusive relationship. Both male and female murderers are relatively young. Highest murder rate is from the ages 15 to 19 for males and 20 to 24 for females, which I find that kind of interesting because my idea would be that women are more mature sooner, and so, well, maybe that does make sense because when you're younger than 15, you probably have you're less likely to kill just because you don't have access. But why I would say that psychologically that males would be more likely would be that because the prefrontal cortex for males and females is not completed. So the part of your brain, the cortex is the part of your brain that helps you make choices, right and wrong. It helps you not make a compulsive. Compulsive means just you think of it and you do it. You think of it and you do it. It helps you to interrupt that compulsive thought. I might feel like killing someone when they tick me off, but my prefrontal cortex intervenes and says, yeah, but no, you don't want to have to deal with it afterwards. You know, it's split-second thought. But if that isn't completely developed, which it's not in young people, and unfortunately I'm talking to you right now, you guys that are guys and gals who are probably not 25 yet. Some of you might be. Your brain is underdeveloped. You're not done. You're not the cook. You need to go back in the oven and cook some more. And so you don't have as much power to apply to your instincts, which is to kill or be killed. You know, you're this is all from a psychological perspective. There's other reasons too, so maybe we'll get into that. The overall murder rate in the United States is lower than it was in the mid 80s, so we've actually decreased. And probably the reason it might seem more that it's increased is because the media. And we have a lot more media, I'll just call it interference. That's just noise, and you hear about things. You have, or you could say they have better coverage. You hear about things that happen um, that in the past you wouldn't have heard about. Like if you lived in Greensburg, Kansas, for instance, you might not have heard what happened in New York today. And so they didn't publish it. But now it seems like we hear more about it, so we think there's more. It's kind of funny because I remember I have, when I work at on-site workshops, all of the therapists, we fly in from all over really all over the world, South America, Canada, England. We have therapists, but most of us are from the United States. But have colleagues that fly in from New York, and they're terribly frightened about, they don't want to stay in the cabins that are away uh, from the workshop area, from the camping. It's not really a camp. It's a very nice workshop area where we have cabins. But there's one cabin that's off of campus. That's what I'm trying to say. And they're scared to live out, to go stay at night because we work all day and then in the evenings we have off because we're doing intensive therapy during the day. Well, they don't want to stay out in the cabins in the country because it's in the rolling hills of Tennessee. It's country. It's real country out there, about probably an hour and a half away from Nashville. And they're afraid that they're going to get murdered or raped out there. And I say, you're from New York City and you're afraid of you realize that the murder rate in the country is much lower than in New York City. Oh, no, 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 no. No, that can't be. And I say, yes, it is. I can prove it to you. And they say, well, I know New York. So they think they can protect themselves because they know, and which there's probably some truth to that. They know New York and they know the culture. So they know where not to go and where to walk and those kind of things, and who to, don't ever give anybody the time because that's a lot of people that thieves will take, will use the advantage to get you to stop and see if you're a quote unquote sucker and easily taken advantage of. So they know all that there, but in Tennessee, they don't even, everything sounds different. It sounds like you're in a foreign language, in a foreign land to them, and they're terribly scared about living in the country. So just for kids like that, just for ideas like that. In 1985, they had an upsurge in murders committed by teenagers. Why? Many inner city teenagers carry guns to protect themselves. Availability of guns, dysfunctional families, drugs, the declining quality of the public schools, and increased violence on TV and in the movies. So many reasons can come forth about why we'll see upsurges in murder rates or any kind of criminal or deviant behavior. Here's a video about who is more likely to kill, and I'll post that video for you. I don't know if it'll work on this with this system that I have. Probably not. Well, I'm not going to wait for it. I think it might. I just don't. No, it's not going to. Okay, I'll post the video for you after this below this video, a link. Here's how, this is what I was talking about with my New York City colleague, how urban and rural murder rates differ. Well, in the large cities, you have murder rates in 2015 per 100,000 per capita, or per 100,000 people, you have 10 murders, 10.1. At the higher the population, the higher the murder rate, which is interesting because that's what I was trying to tell my colleague. In rural areas, it's 3.6. So it's as low as 3.6. Small cities, you can see it even goes lower. Now, why would that be? Well, you can imagine, we could postulate some hypotheses here. Rural areas, maybe it's the isolation, it's too much isolation. Whereas in small cities, everybody knows each other. So, I mean, to a certain extent, you're more likely to know your neighbors. You're more likely to know the person you run into in Walmart. And so you have a sense of community. That's my spin on it. Fewer murders occur during the fall and spring, and more during July and August. They also peak during December. Saturday night's the time of week murders, most often, time of week. So, party night, out being stupid. Higher class murderers, though, are more premeditated and show no variation by time of year or week. So premeditated murders tend to be, especially in the higher classes, tend to be planned out, and they don't seem to have any seasonal change. Not enough to be recordable. Men commit murders inside and outside the house. Women almost exclusively kill in their own homes, especially in the kitchen. So watch out, guys, when your wife's cooking meals. You got to be careful what you say. If guns were less available, many heated arguments would result in aggravated assaults rather than murders. This is kind of obvious. The gun is a lethal weapon, whereas a knife or a fist, it's potentially lethal, more potentially. Let's say the gun is more potential lethality. That's why when we look at suicides, we'll see that men tend to have more access to guns, and so there's more lethal completion of suicide. In other words, because they're using a lethal weapon. Oh, who's that barking? I wonder who that is barking in my Tebow. Stop. Okay, so that's part of what you get to report in your reflection, besides your reflection on assault. Go see who's out there. He's barking at somebody in the kitchen making noise. He's protecting us from all the murderers. Now, I'm not going to the kitchen though. So it's true. If guns were less available, then maybe less accessible would be a better way to put it. In America, because if you had the gun trigger, they have that trigger lock you can put on them. If you had that on there, it'd take more time for you to get the gun out, and maybe you would think through, and your prefrontal cortex would kick back in, and you'd be able to stop yourself from the kind of impulsive killing where you just kill because you're angry, not premeditated so much. In America, over 10,000 handgun homicides occur each year. In other industrialized nations, such as Canada, England, and Japan, where guns are much harder to get, the number is less than 100. Okay, so here's my spin on this, guys. But in Canada, England, and Japan, their governments are more likely to be able to abuse them and they have less recourse if they were to be overrun, say, even by another country. Let's say they were invaded. Are they going to be able to protect themselves with their tennis rackets? Okay, anyway, that's just my spin, guys. I'm a gun owner. I'll admit it. Characteristics of homicide. Of all crimes, homicide is less likely to involve strangers. Less than 20% are strangers. It's your family you have to be careful of. It's people you know. That's who murders. 1 in 4 homicides, the victim first attacks his subsequent slayer. Victim precipitated homicide. In 1 out of 4 homicides, the victim has attacked the slayer, right? And so the slayer retaliates. Most homicides result from a character contest among lower classes, and this is because we learn in our Building Bridges Out of Poverty class, what do we learn, people, about the lower class? What's the most important thing to lower class people? What is the center of their circle? In that circle that we made on the board, I'll tell you, it's relationships. And also, because I don't have a lot of wealth to show off how, I'm not driving the fancy sports car. I don't have a huge house. I don't have a boat sitting in the driveway. Only thing I have is who I am. And if you diss me, I'm going to protect it because it's all I have. And that means that in your relationships include that how other people think about me. Does that make sense? I hope. Homicide, suicide offenders first kill another person and then themselves. You hear that? I just heard about 2 of them in the Tulsa area, Tulsa Broken Arrow area. 2 apparent suicides. Sociologists see suicide as remorse. So after you kill someone, maybe you realize the seriousness of it, or you come to a different meaning, and you feel remorse, and you decide, what have I got to live for now? Or you know that you're going to have to pay the consequences, so you are in the heat of the battle here and do it to yourself. Psychologists see suicide as psychosis, so it's learning. I don't know that that's exactly true. Psychosis is, well, we would say that somebody is not thinking straight. I don't know if you'd call it psychosis. But however, I've also seen people who commit suicide for completely rational reasons. They don't see any hope. So I don't know that I don't see how they can say that that's the only thing psychologists think. Because these guys these are cops. Criminal justice, okay? They have tendency to diss psychology, which I don't blame them. Mass murder, killing a number of people at about the same time and place, obviously. Offenders usually die by their own hands or their hands of the police. Serial murder involves killing a number of people one at a time. Most murder in one city plan what they do, stalk their victims, and lure them into traps. And the reason we know most of this could be the contributions of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's psychology unit. And they started developing this in order to understand serial killers and rapists and things like that. They want to understand how they think and why they do what they do. There's actually a video on it. Can't think of the name of it, but some of you already know it. We've talked about it in class. Most murder in one city, plan what they do, and often suffered abuse while children and cannot feel remorse for hurting others. And this is called attachment disorder. There's actually evidence that if you don't get the proper, and it's not as much about abuse as neglect. So in the researchers that I know one personally, Dr. Randolph, and what she found in her research was that these people that have no remorse, it's because your brain actually develops the ability to have a conscience. And you develop the conscience through your relationship to your caregivers. And if you don't have certain even movements like being rocked or learning to crawl, like if you were, let's say you were left in a crib for the first year of life, and I know I worked with a kid that was true, and he didn't have any remorse. One of the things he did was he set his sister's hair on fire when he I don't know what he was upset about. I don't remember right now, but he had two parents that they had two good parents that adopted him and his sister and his younger sister, and he tried to set her on fire. He did multiple horrible things, and honestly, the only reason he felt bad about it is because he got caught. And he didn't have a sense of conscience. And you develop that through body movements, through the normal that the normal behaviors that a parent, a mother mostly, is supposed to do with her child. And his druggy mom didn't do that for him. So he didn't feel remorse. He doesn't feel, and it's very difficult for those of us that have a heart. I always say have a heart for other people. When you have a heart for other people, you can't not, you can quit for a while, you can get mad and say, I'm just not going to care about anybody. But ultimately, you still have, and it's on a continuum, you still have the capacity for caring for other people, and you can't help yourself. Well, they're the same way, except they don't have the capacity on a continuum for feeling for others, and they can't help themselves. In other words, they can't develop a conscience without it. It's like character, personality. You can't you can't change it much. It's pretty well fixed, as far as we know. So this guy is just like you can't help but have a heart for people and feel bad for them. They can't help themselves feel bad. They just have to know they're going to go to jail, they're going to go to prison. Someday they're going to be able to tell themselves, if they want to, that they can't act in certain ways because society won't tolerate it. But they have no feelings about it. They don't, and they may get a sense of excitement from doing horrible things like serial killing. Most of them aren't murderers. Most of them just do kind of nasty things, especially kids. But there are kids that kill. Most victims know they're killers, obviously. So you can look at that. Whoa, my fingers hit the button. Okay, we'll go back. Okay, now I got it. Most victims know their killers where we know the relationship. Their acquaintances are 55.9%, family members 24.5%, and strangers are only 19.6% of the murderers. I think I updated that slide is what I did. I think that's what I did on this. It's been a while, 2011. Probably there's another updated. Yeah, it's about the same. No, let's see, they actually changed the numbers on that, so it's just more updated. I went and found a more updated slide because I didn't want to throw away these slides because I had the videos built into them for people. If I posted them, I wanted to be able to see the videos in context of the PowerPoint, so I'd have to redo all of that. Social profile of serial killers. Most of them are unusually seem like ordinary people. Usually seem like ordinary people. If I could change that, I don't think I can now. It won't let me do it because I'm videotaping this through the computer. Most are blue-collar workers. What's a blue-collar worker? Those are lower class jobs, typically, but that doesn't mean they aren't getting paid money because union workers usually get paid pretty good. Not as much as doctors or lawyers or that kind of thing, but I mean, that's a blue-collar worker. And usually white men in their 20s or 30s, typically motivated by intense desire for power and sadism. Sadism means I get a thrill out of inducing pain. And a masochist would be somebody who gets a thrill out of receiving it. So if you see S&M, somebody refer to S&M, sadism and masochism. S&M, that's what it stands for. And it's a perversion of sexual behaviors. and people will get off on that, not necessarily murders, but they'll get off on the perversion itself, pornography. It's a form of pornography and sexual behaviors. Global perspective from the homicide from a global perspective. Homicide rates are higher in developing countries. Latin America is the highest in the world, and this has been shown to be because of the machismo country. Especially in their culture, the man's pride in themselves, their ability to be dominant, is primary, and so they will fight to the death. It used to be that way in Europe to a certain extent because they would have duels. If you dissed me, I just challenge you to a duel, and we go out and it gives you a chance to try to shoot each other. It's great. In the highly patriarchal societies such as the Middle East, women are likely to fall victim to honor killings by their male relatives, and you probably know what that is, but it's where somebody kills the woman because she has dissed her husband. She's maybe shown her leg or something, or not done something she was told. Because there's a lot, and it's very, very bad in the Middle East. Because my daughter actually is an evangelist in the Middle East, and she told me that in some of the very conservative countries, especially the Muslim religion, women they're at best second-class citizens. They're the property of their husband, and the children are the property of the husband. And U.S. is the highest among developing countries. The U.S. is the highest because I guess we're still considered developing. School violence. This is something that really troubles people because, I mean, think about it. We think about sending our kids to school. It's a safe place. Well, sometimes it's not. School violence is attributed to availability of guns, media violence, and a culture of violence. So I find it always interesting, the media that comes out, and especially left-leaning media. Well, they're all left-leaning media except for a couple. They always come out against guns and gun ownership, but reality is that the media itself is responsible too, and to a certain, probably more, I think, more than just the availability. The availability is there, but training people to lose their cool and fight back is media. And it's also, I'll give you, the parents' responsibility that they have not been responsible with their children. So, and part of that goes back to also the teenage developmental stage was created through the lack. We don't have teenagers don't have a sense of purpose because they're not required to help their family survive and to work together. They have too much time on their hands, video games, etc. And that can lead someone to develop violent behaviors. Now, very few people do it, but if a tendency towards violence is there and you give someone those kinds of fantasy games, then that creates more potential violent behavior. And if a gun's available, that increases the chances that someone could kill another person. Now, school violence, it tends to be people rejected by parents and peers. So people that have been, yeah, you're just a worthless piece of you know what, and then they go to school and sometimes they act the part, as well as maybe they're odd or different, or maybe the group itself just takes out somebody and says, you're the weirdo. Maybe people enjoy that or get a feeling of confidence, of false confidence, from being able to point to someone who's different, and they could say, you weirdo, and eventually some of those folks decide that they can do what they can do, which is kill everybody. Stalking, the act of pursuing someone that creates the fear of being assaulted or killed. And the stalkers usually know their victims, and in most cases are men stalking women. No racial differences. But occasionally, as far as stalker goes, you'll find, like, for instance, John Lennon, the Beatles. John Lennon, he was murdered by his stalker. Now, the stalker, quote unquote, knew him through the media, through because he was a famous guy, right? But the stalker, I don't think the stalker knew him personally, unless you would count maybe casual contact, just maybe like a fan, and they maybe have talked to maybe they talked to him. I don't know, but he wasn't like it wasn't somebody who had a relationship with John. He just this person felt rejected by John because they wanted to have some kind of relationship with him. Hate killing. We developed the idea of a hate crime around this. African Americans and gays are most likely victims. I kind of question that, but okay. I mean, yeah, that's probably right. They're probably a higher percentage. Most hate killers are part of hate groups, often formed in prison. So that's actually true. Now, I worked in a prison, but it wasn't a prison where you would have seen that. Might have been going on, but because it was a mental health prison and because they were all separated for the most part, there wasn't gangs. Now, there were gang affiliations. It wasn't allowed, but there was still people that would affiliate themselves if they were in the prison, because in the regular prisons, because that's the only way to survive. And especially those people with mental illness, or they were supposed to take medication just to control their schizophrenia. A lot of times they would be victimized in prison because people would identify them as being weak and unable to, well, they weren't any weaker than anybody else. They just didn't have the affiliation with people who would help them group together. And then they would affiliate with people that would help them, and those people would probably use them too, but they would know, at least they know their users. 3 types of hate killers: thrill hate killers, people that just get off on it; defensive hate killers, angry at the person that is abusing them maybe; and mission hate killers, I'm going to kill all of this particular group, gays, whatever. Then we go to genocide. Boy, we've got some good ones in this. Genocide is a whole-scale killing of a racial or ethnic group. Perpetrators have a job of killing others under orders, and bystanders bystanders are average citizens who usually do nothing. So in the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, Nazi Holocaust actually, many of those people were officers or service members of the Nazi Party or the German Army, Navy, all of that, and they were under orders. They were told, you go do this. They do it. And then they'd say, well, I was just following orders. Well, there's a thing about following orders that are not, if it's unethical, you're really required not to follow the order and take the consequences. Even if you get in trouble, you're not supposed to do it. And but anyway, that's what happens in that kind of thing. I think Rwanda, there were I think it's Hutsis and Tutsis. Tutsi, I can't remember how it goes. Tutsis. Anyway, I'm a funny old man. I can't remember exactly how it goes. There was also a recent genocide in Europe, and I'll probably post you a video about this that you can watch. Theories about genocide. Why do people do it? Physical or psychological separation between perpetrators and victims. So there tends to be a big difference seen. It's obvious difference. Dehumanization of victims. So we have to see them as, in Vietnam, it was gooks. In the World War II, it was Krauts, you know, Germans. I don't remember what they called us. Anyway, I know they had words for us, but what you have to do is see them not as human beings, so that you're it's easier to do the killing that has to be done in war. Right? They're going to kill me, but at the same time, after you kill somebody and you see them laying there, I'm sure I haven't had that experience, but what I've been told is there's a certain amount of remorse that you just have to deal with, and a lot of times people come back and have PTSD as a result of that. You also need to have obedience, especially drilled into you, like you would have in an army. Psychological ability to disassociate yourself from the insanity of killing. So you have to be able to separate, compartmentalize, build a part. There's a part where you go and kill, and then there's a part where you go home to your family, and it's that can become problematic. And then the power where the powerful government can carry out killing on a large scale. In other words, if the government has the ability to do it, they have to have enough power over the people that help them do it. Or you could have a bomb. You could have tools, tools that work for that. Terrorism is defined as violence intended for a government, but victims are usually innocent citizens. So I'm going to show this government how I really feel, and they blow up, uh, say, the Murrow building, Timothy McVeigh. Those of you from Oklahoma should be educated about that. Timothy McVeigh was a dissatisfied an ex-service member, and probably didn't act alone. Probably had help. I think they had one person maybe they convicted with him, and he blew up the FBI building in Oklahoma City, and there were the daycare center right in the front where he did it. I think he knew that he was doing that. I mean, he knew that he was going to take out innocent people, but it doesn't matter, because ultimately, to them, the intended the message that he got people's attention. Al Qaeda is another one that blew up our World Trade Center with airplanes, and that brought forth the war on terrorism, which, if you wanted to have a whole nother class, we might talk about that if we get out of this ice storm by Thursday, about how the war on terrorism has included us giving up many of our rights. So if the government decides you're a quote unquote, you're involved in terrorism, they don't have to have search warrants. Your rights are abrogated. Abrogated, you know what that means? It means thrown away. They are overridden by what the government wants to do to you. And so they can use that for an excuse, right? We'd assume then that we have very ethical people in government, right? In the FBI. I always thought that there were ethical people in the FBI. I didn't. They were the unreproachable. You can't say anything against them, because they stand for justice, truth, and justice. They're the ultimate. And now we find out that they have been involved and it's not just the FBI as a whole organization, but there are people at the top who are literally involved in criminal activity toward our government, and it's been proven. And you aren't hearing about it in the media, but it's proven. And I'm not a nut about this stuff, a conspiracy nut. It's true. There's actual evidence that will back it up, and I don't know why people should be going to jail. Comey is one of them. His last name is Comey. I don't have much respect for any of these people. They headed up and tried to basically do a coup on our government. Well, they did perform a coup. It just didn't. They couldn't get rid of him. Why do people kill? Two popular theories. External restraint theory tries to explain how the presence or absence of restraints controls the expression of frustration. So if we have a society where murder or violence is it's taught again. It's very much a structured society where people feel here's a sense, there's uh, a law, we're going to follow the law, but if that's not done, then there's frustration. Why does this person over here get away with with what they're doing? And I'm frustrated because I can't see any justice. And then the subculture, there's another theory is a subculture of violence, a basic cause of high homicide rates in poor neighborhoods. So um, the subcultural violence says in poor neighborhoods that if somebody hits you, comes at you with a knife, you go at them with a gun. You know, if they hit me in the face, I, if they hit me one time, I punch them 2 times back. You know, I get my revenge. You don't diss me. So there's a culture of violence. It's basically the way you show you defend yourself, your ability, your who you are. Does the death penalty deter murder? It's not very effective, but it does prevent the offender from committing further crime. You think? You know, you kill them, they won't be doing it again. And it also satisfies our cry for retribution. So we think there should be some justice. How can you get justice? How can you bring back your murdered relative, friend? You can't. So the only thing we can do, the one thing that we feels like you get a sense of justice, is that an eye for an eye. They get murdered because they're murdered. We don't call it murder if it's death penalty, but it's death. Here's a let's see, murder rate in death penalty states, 5.7. And it stayed about the same. Murder rate in non-death penalty states, it's actually lower, slightly lower. 35%, not slightly, 35% difference in non-death penalty states. Now, that doesn't necessarily take into consideration all of the other aspects. You know, certain states are in the south, certain states are in the north. They may have corrected for that, but I don't know. You'd have to look that up in your textbook. It's going to tell you. And then finally, there's a video that I will post for you. So 2 videos, and I've covered all the slides. So we'll see you on Thursday, hopefully, and we'll do something else besides listening to me cover a PowerPoint. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you're staying warm. I will send you an email posting. You will have already seen an email if you watch this. So it's weird doing videos because I don't. Anyway, take care. Have fun on your snow day.